Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with a torn rag that had seen better decades. The cargo bay of the trading station Meridian Prime echoed with the sounds of hydraulic hissing and metal grinding against metal. 6 years he'd been working this same corner of the galaxy, fixing ships that most mechanics wouldn't touch, earning a reputation as the human who could make anything fly again. The Caldrith merchant vessel before him wheezed like an old man climbing stairs. Its plasma converters were shot. The anti-grav generators were held together with prayers and welding wire, and the life support system made sounds that suggested it was actively plotting against its occupants. Most mechanics would have declared it scrap and walked away, but Marcus had learned long ago that humans saw possibilities where other species saw only problems. Engine trouble again? Vex, Marcus called out to the ship's captain, a 6-armed Caldrith, whose purple skin was marked with the ritual scars that indicated a trader's rank. Captain Vex High had been bringing his ships to Marcus for 3 years now, ever since the human had managed to resurrect a freighter that 5 different alien mechanics had pronounced dead. The worst kind, Vex High replied, his voice carrying the multiple harmonics that made Caldrith's speech sound like a chorus. The ship flies, but barely. We lost 2 plasma injectors coming out of hyperspace near the Andorian Nebula. The replacement parts cost more than the cargo we're carrying. Marcus nodded, already reaching for his diagnostic tools. This was the reality of being human in this part of the galaxy. Most species had given up the idea of fixing things when they broke. The Caldrith bought new ships when the old ones failed. The crystalline Nethys simply grew new vessels from their living ships when damage occurred. The energy-based lumens didn't even use mechanical transport, preferring to surf electromagnetic waves across space. But humans fixed things. Humans looked at broken machinery and saw potential. It was what had made them valuable as the galaxy's mechanic species, even if it also made them seem primitive to more advanced civilizations. Let me take a look, Marcus said, connecting his diagnostic pad to the ship's main computer. The readings that flowed across his screen made him whistle low. Vex, how is this thing even staying in one piece? Human stubbornness, I believe, the alien captain replied with what Marcus had learned to recognize as Caldrith humor. The previous mechanic was human as well. Fixed her up about 8 years ago and told me she'd run forever if I treated her right. Something cold settled in Marcus's stomach. 8 years ago? What station? Nexus Point. Out near the Dragon Worlds. Strangest human I ever met, that one. Brilliant mechanic, but something haunted about her. Had scales mixed in with her skin, like she'd been modified or something. Never seen anything like it. The diagnostic pad slipped from Marcus's suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering against the deck plating. 8 years ago. Nexus Point. The Dragon Worlds. Zara. Her name hit him like a physical blow, bringing back memories he'd spent 6 years trying to bury. Dr. Zara Nightwind. The half-human, half-Drakmori xenobiologist who had stolen his heart and then vanished without explanation. The woman whose mixed heritage had given her the Drakmori's natural scales along human features, making her the most beautiful creature Marcus had ever seen. They'd met when his repair ship had docked at Nexus Point for emergency repairs. She'd been working there as both a mechanic and researcher, studying the intersection of biological and mechanical systems. For 6 months, they'd been inseparable. She'd taught him tricks for working with biomechanical systems that most humans never learned. He'd shown her how to see the soul in broken machinery, how to feel what a ship needed rather than just reading diagnostics. And then one day, she was gone. No message, no explanation, just an empty research lab and a docking bay where her ship used to be. You all right there, Marcus? Vex High asked, his 4 eyes showing genuine concern. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, Marcus lied, retrieving his diagnostic pad. Just remembered something. Tell me more about this mechanic. What did she look like? Like I said, part human, part Drakmori. Beautiful in that dangerous way that dragon folk have. Hair like liquid starlight. Scales that shifted color with her mood. Had a way of talking to machines like they were alive. Vex High paused, studying Marcus's face carefully. You knew her. It wasn't a question. The Caldrith were excellent at reading emotional states, a necessary skill for traders who dealt with dozens of different species. I thought I did, Marcus said quietly. What happened to her? She left suddenly, maybe 7 years ago now. Heard rumors she'd taken a position with the Drakmori Assembly, doing research work out in the deep territories. But that might just be station gossip. 7 years. That meant she'd left Nexus Point about a year after she'd disappeared from Marcus's life. The timeline created questions that made his chest tight with old pain and new confusion. Did she ever mention why she left her previous position? Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice casual as he ran his scanner over the damaged plasma injectors. Funny you should ask. She did mention something once when she'd been drinking that Terran whiskey humans are so fond of. Said she'd left someone behind who deserved better than the complications she'd bring to his life. Vex High's multiple arms gestured in what Marcus recognized as sympathy. Sounded like she was running from love, not toward it. The plasma injector in Marcus's hands cracked under his suddenly increased grip. Zara had left him to protect him? From what? Her mixed heritage had never mattered to him. If anything, it had made her more fascinating, more wonderful. She could interface directly with biomechanical systems, understand alien technology in ways pure humans never could. She was brilliant, beautiful, and the first person who'd made him believe in forever. These injectors are completely shot, Marcus said, forcing himself to focus on the work. But I can rebuild them using parts from 3 different systems. It'll take me about 2 days, and it won't be pretty, but it'll get you where you need to go. This is why I come to you, human. Other mechanics see problems. You see solutions. As Vex High left to arrange accommodations for his crew during the repairs, Marcus found himself staring at the damaged injectors without really seeing them. His mind was light years away, orbiting questions that had haunted him for 6 years. Why had Zara really left? What complications could she have been talking about? And most importantly, was she still out there in the Dragon Worlds, working for the Drakmori Assembly? The Drakmori were one of the oldest and most mysterious species in the galaxy. They'd achieved faster than light travel when humans were still figuring out agriculture, and their technology blended biological and mechanical elements so seamlessly that most other species considered it almost magical. They were also intensely private, rarely allowing outsiders into their territories and never sharing their advanced biotechnology. For a half-Drakmori like Zara to be working directly with the Assembly was both a tremendous honor and a virtual guarantee that she was now beyond the reach of ordinary people like Marcus. The Dragon people didn't just employ researchers, they adopted them into their clan structures, making them part of Drakmori society in ways that transcended simple job descriptions. Marcus had spent years telling himself that he'd moved on, that the traveling life of a freelance mechanic was exactly what he wanted. He fixed ships, earned enough credits to keep his own small vessel running, and stayed moving so that he never had to put down roots that could be torn away again. It was a good life, a simple life, a life that didn't require him to trust anyone enough to let them break his heart. But now, with the possibility that Zara was still out there, all of those carefully constructed defenses felt as fragile as the plasma injectors in his hands. He spent the next 2 days rebuilding the Caldrith ship's damaged systems, but his heart wasn't in the work. His hands performed the familiar motions automatically, while his mind wandered through possibilities and plans. The Dragon Worlds weren't far from his current position. Maybe 3 weeks' travel in his own ship. He had enough credits saved up to make the journey, and his reputation was solid enough that he could probably find work there. The question was whether he wanted to open old wounds that had finally started to heal. On the second evening, as he was putting the finishing touches on the rebuilt plasma distribution system, an unexpected visitor appeared in his workshop. She was tall and elegant, with the characteristic pointed ears and silver eyes of the Altarian diplomatic corps. Her robes marked her as someone of significant rank, probably an ambassador or senior trade representative. "Master Chen?" she asked, her voice carrying the musical quality that made Altarian speech so pleasant to hear. "I am Ambassador Lyrain of the Altarian Trade Commission. I understand you specialize in difficult repairs." Marcus looked up from his work, surprised. Altarians typically used only the finest mechanics, usually members of their own species who had trained for decades in their prestigious technical academies. For one of their diplomats to seek out a human mechanic suggested either desperation or something more complex. "Depends on what you need fixed," Marcus said carefully. "I don't work on Altarian neural ships. Too much liability if something goes wrong with the biological components. It's not one of our vessels," Ambassador Lyrain replied. "We've recently acquired a ship of Drakmori origin, and we're having difficulty understanding its systems. Our technicians are afraid to attempt repairs without better knowledge of Dragon Tech biotechnology. We were told that you might have experience with such systems." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Drakmori technology was incredibly rare outside of their home territories. Most species had never even seen a dragon ship up close, let alone worked on one. But he had experience, thanks to the months he'd spent learning from Zara. "I've done some work with biomechanical hybrids," he said slowly. "What kind of problems are you having?" "The ship appears to be in some form of hibernation state. All systems are functional but dormant, and we cannot determine how to activate them. The vessel's AI responds to queries but claims it can only be fully awakened by someone with blood right authorization." Ambassador Lyrain paused, studying Marcus's face. "We believe this refers to Drakmori genetic markers, but we were hoping someone with your expertise might find an alternative approach." Blood right authorization. Marcus had heard Zara mention the concept before. Drakmori ships were bonded to their crews in ways that went beyond simple access codes or neural interfaces. They recognized genetic patterns, family lineages, and even emotional connections that had been properly registered in their bioneural networks. "Where did you acquire this ship?" Marcus asked. "It was found drifting near the border of our space, apparently abandoned. Our salvage laws are quite clear about the rights of vessels found in interstellar space, but we're beginning to suspect this ship wasn't abandoned voluntarily." The ambassador's expression grew troubled. "There are signs that its crew left in haste, possibly under duress." Something cold and sharp twisted in Marcus's gut. "What kind of signs?" "Personal effects left behind. Navigation logs that end abruptly. And most concerning, biological traces that suggest at least one crew member was injured during whatever emergency caused them to abandon ship." Ambassador Lyrain pulled out a small data pad and showed Marcus a series of readings. "These genetic markers indicate the injured party was of mixed human Drakmori heritage. Quite rare as I understand it." The datapad nearly fell from Marcus's suddenly nerveless fingers as he stared at the genetic analysis. The DNA patterns on the screen were unmistakably familiar, burned into his memory from months of watching Zara run similar tests in her research lab. "When did you find this ship?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 days ago. We were hoping to locate the original crew, but our inquiries to the Drakmori Assembly have been unproductive. They seem disinclined to discuss the matter with outsiders. 3 days ago. While he'd been rebuilding plasma injectors and wrestling with memories of the past, somewhere nearby a ship had been found that might contain answers to 6 years of questions. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. "I'll take the job," Marcus said, already reaching for his toolkit. "But I have conditions. I work alone. I get full access to all ship systems and logs, and if I find evidence of what happened to the crew, you share it with me before you report anything to other authorities." Ambassador Lyrain raised an eyebrow at the unusual demands but nodded slowly. "Acceptable. When can you begin?" "Now," Marcus said, sealing his toolkit and grabbing his jacket. "I've been waiting 6 years for answers. I'm not waiting any longer." As they left his workshop and headed toward the docking bays where the mysterious Drakmori ship waited, Marcus felt the familiar mixture of hope and dread that came with chasing ghosts from his past. But this time, the ghost might finally have substance, might finally provide the closure he'd never been able to find on his own. The ship that awaited him in Docking Bay 7 was unlike anything he'd ever seen, even during his time with Zara. It was organic in shape but clearly technological, with flowing lines that suggested both aerodynamic efficiency and biological growth patterns. Its hull seemed to shift color slightly in the station's artificial lighting, like the scales of some enormous sleeping dragon. And despite its dormant state, despite the fact that its systems were allegedly hibernating, Marcus could have sworn he felt the ship watching him as he approached, as if some deep part of its bioneural network recognized something familiar in his genetic signature or emotional state. Something told him that once he stepped aboard that vessel, his carefully ordered life as a traveling mechanic would never be the same again. But 6 years of questions and sleepless nights had prepared him for that possibility. It was time to learn what had happened to the woman he'd never stopped loving, and why the universe had chosen this moment to put her ship directly in his path. The airlock of the Drakmori ship opened with a sound like a sleeping giant drawing breath. Marcus stepped through the threshold and immediately felt the difference. The air itself seemed alive, thick with electromagnetic fields that made his skin tingle and his tools hum with sympathetic vibration. This wasn't just a ship. It was a living organism that happened to travel between stars. The corridors were lined with bioluminescent panels that pulsed gently with an inner light, responding to his presence by brightening to comfortable human levels. The floor beneath his feet felt warm and slightly yielding, like walking on living tissue rather than metal deck plating. Every surface curved gracefully into the next, creating an environment that felt both alien and oddly comforting. "Ship," Marcus called out as he made his way toward what his experience told him should be the central command area. "Can you hear me?" A voice answered from all around him, neither male nor female but somehow achingly familiar. "I hear you, stranger who carries familiar patterns, but I cannot fully awaken without blood-right confirmation. Are you here to attempt repairs?" The voice made Marcus's chest tighten. It was the ship's AI, but something in its speech patterns, its intonation, reminded him powerfully of Zara. Of course it would. Drakmori ships bonded with their crews, learning from them, taking on aspects of their personalities and memories. "I'm here to understand what happened," Marcus said carefully. "Can you tell me about your crew?" "My bonded one and her offspring departed 17 standard days ago during emergency protocols. Systems indicate distress and possible pursuit. I was instructed to wait, but my bonded one has not returned." The AI's voice carried an emotional weight that seemed impossible for artificial intelligence, but Marcus knew that Drakmori bioneural networks were far more advanced than anything other species had developed. "Her offspring." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, sending him stumbling against the corridor wall. His vision went white at the edges as the implications crashed over him. Zara had a child who had been with her when whatever emergency had forced them to abandon this ship had occurred. "How old?" Marcus whispered, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. "The small one has lived for 5 years and 7 months. The ship replied with obvious affection warming its artificial voice. "Curious and brave like her mother, but with the determined spirit of her father's people. She asks many questions about mechanical systems. 5 years and 7 months. Marcus slumped against the bioluminescent wall as the mathematics carved themselves into his brain with merciless precision. Zara had left him 6 years ago. She'd spent time at Nexus Point before disappearing toward the Dragon Worlds, and now there was a child. A little girl who was almost exactly the right age to be. "What was the small one's name?" Marcus asked, through a throat that felt lined with sandpaper. "She is called Elena Starweaver, though she prefers to be called Ellie. My bonded one chose the name to honor both her heritage lines. Elena, from the human tradition. Starweaver, from the Drakmori house that adopted her. Elena." Marcus closed his eyes as another piece of his heart broke cleanly in two. Zara had named their daughter after his grandmother, the woman who had raised him after his parents died in a transport accident. She'd heard him talk about Elena Chen countless times during their months together, had listened to his stories about the woman who taught him that broken things could always be fixed with enough patience and love. Their daughter. He had a daughter he'd never met. A little girl who was out there somewhere in the dangerous vastness of space with her mother, possibly running from something terrible enough to make them abandon their ship. "Ship," Marcus said, forcing himself to stand straighter. "I need to see everything. Navigation logs, personal files, sensor records from the day they left. Can you grant me access? You carry genetic markers consistent with family lineage," the AI said after a moment of processing. "But protocol requires blood right confirmation for full access. However, given the emergency circumstances and your apparent connection to my crew, I can provide limited information." "Then show me what you can." The corridor around Marcus shifted and flowed, walls becoming transparent to reveal holographic displays of data streams and sensor readings. The ship's AI began walking him through the events of 17 days ago, painting a picture that made his blood run cold. The ship had been traveling through a neutral trade corridor when long-range sensors detected 3 vessels approaching at high speed. The energy signatures identified them as hegemony enforcer ships, the brutal military arm of a confederation of species that considered humans and their hybrid offspring to be genetic contamination that needed to be eliminated from the galaxy. The hegemony's hatred of humanity was legendary and completely irrational. They believed that human adaptability and resourcefulness represented a threat to the natural order of species development. Human-alien hybrids were considered especially dangerous, viewed as living weapons that could combine the best traits of multiple species. Zara, as a human Drakmori hybrid, would have been a priority target. And their daughter. Marcus felt rage building in his chest like a fusion reactor approaching critical mass. Elena was just a child, an innocent little girl whose only crime was existing with the wrong combination of genes. But to the hegemony, She represented everything they feared about humanity's place in the galaxy. "Show me the emergency protocols," Marcus said through gritted teeth. The holographic displays shifted to show him Zara's desperate preparations. She'd armed the ship's defensive systems, prepared emergency supplies, and recorded a series of personal messages that the AI was instructed to deliver if certain conditions were met. But the hegemony ships had been faster than expected, arriving before she could complete all preparations. "My bonded one activated emergency separation protocol," the ship explained. She and the small one departed in the emergency pod with minimal supplies and maximum stealth capabilities. I was instructed to remain dormant and await rescue, but also to seek help if none came within 30 standard days. Where did they go? The pod's navigation system was programmed for the sanctuary worlds, specifically Haven Station in the Tau Ceti system. It's a refugee settlement protected by the Galactic Council's neutrality accords. Marcus knew about Haven Station. It was where people went when they had nowhere else to run. A collection of converted asteroids and artificial habitats that served as sanctuary for those fleeing persecution. The journey from this position to Haven Station would take at least 3 weeks in an emergency pod, assuming nothing went wrong. Has the pod checked in since departure? Negative. Emergency pods maintain communication silence to avoid detection. However, pod telemetry indicates all systems were functioning normally at time of departure. 3 weeks of travel time. 17 days since departure. If nothing had gone wrong, Zara and Elena should have reached Haven Station days ago. But Marcus's experience had taught him that things went wrong more often than they went right, especially when hegemony enforcers were involved. "I need to see the personal messages," Marcus said, the ones Zara recorded before she left. The AI hesitated, processing protocols and permissions. "One message is specifically designated for delivery to an individual matching your genetic markers. However, playing it will irreversibly confirm your identity in my records." "Play it." The holographic displays faded, replaced by a single image that made Marcus's knees go weak. Zara appeared in the air before him, exactly as he remembered her, but somehow more mature, more serious. The scales along her cheekbones shifted color with her emotional state, currently a deep blue that indicated profound sadness mixed with determination. "Hello, Marcus," her recorded image said, and even through the hologram her voice carried the same warmth that had made him fall in love with her years ago. "If you're seeing this, it means I'm gone and someone with your genetic signature has found my ship. I hope that someone is you. But if it's not, I hope it's someone who can find you and deliver this message." Marcus reached out as if to touch her face, his fingers passing through empty air as his heart broke all over again. "I left without explanation 6 years ago because I discovered something that changed everything. The medical scans I'd been running on myself revealed that I was pregnant. Marcus, pregnant with your child." Her image wavered as emotion affected the recording quality. "I knew what that meant. Human Drakmori hybrids are impossibly rare, and our daughter would be even more unique, the child of a hybrid and a pure human. The hegemony wouldn't just want to kill her, they'd want to study her first, to understand how such genetic combinations were possible." The recording paused as Zara gathered herself, her scales shifting to silver as she fought for composure. "I couldn't ask you to live that life, Marcus. To spend every day looking over your shoulder, wondering if today was the day the hegemony would find us. You deserved better than a life spent running and hiding. So I made the choice for both of us, and I've regretted it every day since." Marcus felt tears burning his eyes as he watched the woman he'd never stopped loving explain why she'd torn their world apart. "Her name is Elena Starweaver, and she's the most beautiful thing I've ever created. She has your eyes and your stubborn determination to fix everything she touches. She builds little machines out of scraps and talks to them like they're alive, just like her father." Zara's image smiled with such love and pride that Marcus felt his chest might explode. "She asks about you constantly. I've told her stories about the brilliant human mechanic who could make any ship sing, who taught me to see the soul in broken machinery. She wants to meet her father more than anything in the universe." The recording flickered as ship systems registered the approaching hegemony vessels. "I don't know if we'll survive what's coming, Marcus. But if we don't, please know that these last 6 years with Elena have been the happiest of my life. She is proof that love can create miracles, that humans and the rest of the galaxy can build something beautiful together." Zara's scales shifted to gold, the color of absolute determination. "If anything happens to me, take care of her. Teach her to fix things the way you taught me. Show her that humans don't give up, that we find ways to make impossible things work. The recording began to fade as emergency klaxons sounded in the background. I love you, Marcus Chen. I never stopped loving you. And your daughter loves you too, even though she's never met you. Find us if you can. Save her if I can't. The hologram vanished, leaving Marcus alone in the bioluminescent corridor with tears streaming down his face and a fury building in his chest that threatened to tear him apart. Zara had thought she was protecting him by leaving, but instead she'd condemned them both to 6 years of unnecessary pain. And now their daughter, his daughter, was out there somewhere, possibly in danger, definitely wondering why her father had never come to find her. Ship, Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. Can you modify your emergency beacon to broadcast a message to Haven Station? Affirmative. What message would you like to transmit? Tell them that Marcus Chen is looking for Zara Nightwind and Elena Starweaver. Tell them I'm coming, and I'm bringing help. Marcus turned toward what his instincts told him was the ship's engineering section. And then I need you to fully activate all systems. We're leaving this station. I cannot depart without my bonded crew. The AI protested. Ship bonding protocols are absolute. Then we'd better go find them, Marcus said grimly. Because I just learned I have a daughter I've never met. And there's no force in this galaxy that's going to keep me away from her any longer. As the ship began to wake from its dormant state around him, bio-neural networks coming online with sounds like whispered songs, Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside him. 6 years ago, he'd been a man destroyed by inexplicable loss. But now he understood the truth. And truth had transformed his grief into something far more dangerous. He was a father. A human father whose child was in danger. The hegemony had no idea what they'd awakened. Marcus spent the next several hours learning the ship's systems with an intensity that surprised even him. Drakmori biotechnology was incredibly advanced, but it followed logical patterns once you understood the underlying principles. More importantly, Zara had apparently spent years modifying and improving the ship's systems, and her touch was evident in every circuit and bio-neural pathway. She'd designed redundancies that could keep the ship functional even if half its systems failed. She'd enhanced the stealth capabilities far beyond normal Drakmori specifications. Most impressively, she'd created a fusion of human mechanical engineering and Drakmori biotechnology that made the ship faster, more efficient, and more adaptable than either species could have achieved alone. It was brilliant work, the kind of innovation that proved humans belonged among the stars not as servants or mechanics, but as full partners in galactic civilization. Your bonded one is an exceptional engineer, Marcus told the AI as he studied her modifications to the faster-than-light drive systems. She learned much from her time with a human mechanic. The ship replied with what Marcus was learning to recognize as subtle humor. She often spoke of techniques she learned from someone who could make fusion drives sing opera and hyperdrive motivators dance waltzes. Marcus felt a bittersweet smile tug at his lips. That had been one of his favorite sayings during their time together. His way of describing the almost musical quality that well-tuned engines produced when everything was working in perfect harmony. How long to reach Haven Station from here? Marcus asked. At maximum safe velocity, 14 standard days. However, my enhanced systems can achieve faster transit with acceptable risk levels. 10 days if we push the bio-neural networks to enhanced performance levels. Push them, Marcus said without hesitation. Every day matters. As the ship prepared for departure, Marcus recorded a message to Ambassador Lyrane, explaining that he'd discovered the ship's crew were family members he'd been searching for, and would be leaving immediately to ensure their safety. The Altarian diplomat would undoubtedly have questions, but Marcus had learned long ago that it was easier to ask forgiveness than permission. The ship lifted away from Meridian Prime with a grace that defied its size. Drakmori biotechnology, allowing it to flow through space like a living thing rather than a mechanical construct. As the station fell away behind them and the stars wheeled into position for their jump to faster-than-light velocity, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 6 years. Hope. His daughter was out there. Elena Starweaver, the child he'd never known existed, who built machines and asked questions and wanted to meet her father. She was real. She was alive. And she was waiting for someone to find her. Marcus Chen had spent 6 years learning to fix broken things. Now it was time to fix the most important thing of all. His family. The ship jumped to hyperspace with a sound like singing, carrying him toward a reunion that would either heal his broken heart or destroy it completely. But for the first time since Zara had vanished from his life, Marcus wasn't afraid of the outcome. He was her father. He was coming, and nothing in the universe was going to stop him from reaching her. Haven Station appeared on the ship's biosensors like a constellation of hope scattered across the darkness. The refugee settlement was vast beyond Marcus's imagination. Dozens of converted asteroids connected by massive transport tubes, artificial habitats spinning slowly to provide gravity, and countless ships of every conceivable design docked at improvised moorings. It was beautiful in its chaotic diversity, a testament to the thousands of beings who had found sanctuary among its metal corridors and pressurized gardens. But as the ship's advanced sensors probed deeper into the station's structure, Marcus felt his hope beginning to crack. There were too many people, too many places for two refugees to hide. Finding Zara and Elena in this maze would be like locating a specific bolt in a scrapped starship. "Ship," Marcus said as they approached the station's traffic control perimeter. "Can you detect any trace of the emergency pod's signature?" The AI was quiet for a long moment, bio-neural networks processing thousands of electromagnetic signatures from the ships and structures around them. "Negative contact on pod signature," it finally replied. "However, I am detecting faint genetic traces consistent with my bonded one and her offspring. The signatures are dispersed and several days old, suggesting they have been moving through the station." Moving through the station meant they were alive. Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders as he guided the ship toward an available docking berth. The Drakmori vessel attracted attention from every direction, its organic lines and shifting hull colors marking it as something extraordinary even among Haven's diverse population. The docking fees were astronomical, but Marcus paid them without question. Credits were meaningless compared to the possibility of finding his family. Haven Station's interior was a sensory overload of sights, sounds, and smells from across the galaxy. The main corridors were packed with beings representing dozens of species, all moving with the purposeful urgency of people who had learned to watch their backs. Street vendors hawked food, medicine, and information in a dozen languages, while children of various species played games that seemed universal despite their alien origins. Marcus made his way toward the station's information center, a vast chamber filled with terminals where refugees could search for missing family members, register their arrival, or request assistance from the various humanitarian organizations that operated in council space. The attendant was an elderly Thurani male, whose forearms moved with practiced efficiency as he helped a steady stream of desperate people. "I'm looking for two specific individuals," Marcus said when his turn came. Human Drakmori hybrid named Zara Nightwind, traveling with a child called Elena Starweaver. They would have arrived within the past few days. The Thurani's compound eyes studied Marcus with sharp intelligence. "You have identification? Relationship to the individuals you seek?" Marcus hesitated for a moment, then pulled up the genetic confirmation from Zara's ship. "I'm Elena's father. I just learned of her existence and came to find them." Something shifted in the attendant's demeanor, professional courtesy warming into genuine sympathy. "Ah, one of those situations." He began typing rapidly on his terminal with two hands, while his other arms gestured for patience. "Yes, they registered 3 days ago. Mother and child, seeking temporary shelter while awaiting contact from family. They're currently housed in Section C7, Residential Level 4. The directions took Marcus through Haven's twisting corridors and up several transport tubes to a section of the station that had clearly been constructed from converted cargo modules. The living spaces were cramped but clean, each unit barely large enough for 2 people but offering privacy and safety that many refugees hadn't known for years. Unit C71047 looked exactly like every other door in the corridor. Gray metal marked with faded numbers and a small status panel indicating occupancy. Marcus stood in front of it for nearly 5 minutes, his hand raised to knock, paralyzed by the magnitude of what waited on the other side. 6 years of questions. A daughter he'd never met, a woman he'd never stopped loving. Finally, before his courage could desert him completely, Marcus knocked. The door opened to reveal Zara exactly as she'd appeared in her recorded message, but somehow more real, more present than any hologram could convey. Her scales shifted rapidly through a spectrum of colors: surprise, disbelief, joy, fear, as her brain processed what her eyes were seeing. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice carrying the same breathless quality he remembered from their first meeting 6 years ago. "How did you? What are you?" Her words trailed off as tears began streaming down her face. cutting bright tracks through the shifting patterns of her scales. "I found your ship," Marcus said simply. "I saw your message." They stared at each other across the threshold. 6 years of separation and misunderstanding stretching between them like an unbridgeable chasm. Then Zara stepped forward and threw herself into his arms with enough force to drive the breath from his lungs, and suddenly nothing else mattered except the feel of her against his chest and the scent of her hair and the impossible reality that she was alive and safe and here. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed against his shoulder. "I thought I was protecting you, but I just made everything worse. I should have told you. Should have trusted you to help me figure it out." "It doesn't matter," Marcus said, holding her tightly enough to convince himself she was real. "None of that matters now. Where is she? Where's Elena?" Zara pulled back just far enough to look into his eyes, her scales settling into patterns of gold and silver that he'd learned meant absolute love mixed with lingering fear. "She's in the play area down the hall. I didn't want to. I wasn't sure how to." She took a shaky breath and tried again. "She asks about you every day, Marcus. Every single day, for 5 years. She's asked when her father is coming to find us." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The knowledge that his daughter had spent years waiting for him, wondering why he never came. "Take me to her," he said. "Please." The community play area was a large room filled with toys and games designed for children of multiple species. About 20 young beings were scattered around the space, playing with blocks that changed color when touched, racing small vehicles that responded to mental commands, or simply running around with the boundless energy that seemed universal among young creatures. Marcus spotted her immediately. Elena Starweaver was smaller than he'd expected, but she carried herself with a confidence that reminded him powerfully of her mother. Her hair was the same liquid silver as Zara's, but her eyes were absolutely human, dark brown and full of curiosity, as she studied a broken toy shuttle with the focused attention of someone determined to understand how it worked. She was beautiful beyond any definition the word had ever carried for him, perfect in ways that made his chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. She was also unmistakably his daughter. The way she tilted her head when concentrating, the precise movements of her small hands as she examined the toy's components, even the little frown line between her eyebrows that appeared when she encountered a particularly puzzling problem. "Ellie," Zara called softly. "There's someone here I'd like you to meet." Elena looked up from her broken toy, her gaze moving from her mother to the tall human standing beside her. For a moment, her expression showed simple curiosity. Then something deeper awakened in her eyes, some instinctive recognition that made her face light up with wonder. "Are you my father?" she asked with the directness that only children could manage, her voice carrying a slight accent that mixed human inflection with Drakmori harmonics. Marcus dropped to one knee, bringing himself down to her level, and felt his entire world realign around this small person who shared his genes and Zara's courage. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. "I'm your father, Elena. I'm Marcus." She studied his face with intense concentration, comparing what she saw to whatever mental image she'd constructed from years of stories. Then she smiled, and Marcus felt his heart stop completely. "Mama said you could fix anything," Elena said, holding up her broken toy. "Can you fix this?" The simple request, offered with such absolute trust, destroyed the last of Marcus's composure. Tears he'd been holding back for 6 years finally broke free, streaming down his face as he looked at this miracle of a child who wanted nothing more than for her father to fix her broken toy. "Yes," he whispered, accepting the shuttle with shaking hands. "I can fix it." The repair was simple, a loose connection in the motivator circuit that had probably occurred when the toy was dropped. Marcus's fingers worked automatically while his vision blurred with tears, muscle memory guiding him through the familiar motions of diagnosis and repair, while his brain tried to process the magnitude of what was happening. He had a daughter, a brilliant, beautiful, brave little girl who built things and asked questions and trusted him completely despite having just met him. The future he'd thought was lost forever was suddenly real and tangible, and sitting cross-legged in front of him, waiting patiently for him to finish his work. "There," Marcus said, handing back the repaired shuttle. "Good as new." Elena activated the toy and squealed with delight as it hummed to life, its miniature engines glowing softly as it hovered above her palm. Then she looked up at Marcus with such pure joy that he felt something fundamental shift inside his chest, like a broken component finally finding its proper place in the circuit. "Thank you, Papa," she said, and launched herself into his arms with the complete abandon of a child who had never doubted that this moment would eventually come. Marcus caught her against his chest and held her tightly, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his. She was real. She was his. She was calling him Papa with such natural ease that it felt like she'd been waiting her entire life for this embrace. And Marcus wept. He wept for the 6 years he'd lost, for the bedtime stories he'd never read and the scraped knees he'd never bandaged. He wept for Zara's terror and isolation, for the impossible choice she'd thought she had to make. He wept for Elena's patient faith that her father would someday find her, and for his own stubborn refusal to look for answers that had been waiting to be discovered. But mostly, he wept from pure, overwhelming joy, because his family was whole again, and his daughter was in his arms, and nothing in the universe would ever separate them again. "I've been waiting for you, Papa," Elena whispered against his shoulder. "Mama said you might never find us, but I knew you would. Mama told me you never give up on broken things." "Never," Marcus promised, his voice rough with emotion. "I will never give up on you, Elena. Not ever." "Can you teach me to fix starships?" she asked, pulling back to look at his face with eyes that sparkled with eagerness. "Mama taught me about bio-neural networks, but she says you know how to make mechanical systems sing." Marcus laughed through his tears, recognizing his own words coming back to him through this miraculous child. "I'll teach you everything I know," he promised. "We'll start with the easy stuff and work our way up to making fusion drives dance." Elena giggled at the absurdity of dancing starship engines, but her expression grew serious again as she studied his face. "Are you going to stay with us now? Are we going to be a real family?" The question was asked with such hope and vulnerability that Marcus felt his heart break all over again. But this time, it broke open rather than apart, making room for more love than he'd ever imagined possible. "Yes," he said firmly, looking from Elena to Zara, who was watching their reunion with tears streaming down her face and scales shifting through every color of joy and relief. "We're going to be a real family. No more running. No more hiding. We'll find somewhere safe where you can build all the machines you want and learn everything there is to know about fixing things." "What about the hegemony?" Zara asked quietly. "They're still out there, still hunting people like us." Marcus's expression hardened as he thought about the enforcement ships that had driven his family to abandon their home and flee across the galaxy. "Let them come," he said with quiet conviction. "I've spent 6 years learning that humans don't give up on the things they love. They want to make this about genetics and species purity. Fine. I'll show them what human determination really looks like." "Papa's going to fight the bad ships?" Elena asked with the fearless curiosity of a child who trusted her parents to handle all scary things. "Papa's going to make sure the bad ships can't hurt anyone else," Marcus said carefully. "But mostly, Papa's just going to love his family and teach his daughter how to build wonderful things." That evening, as they sat together in the small quarters Zara had secured on Haven Station, Marcus finally heard the full story of Elena's early years. She'd taken her first steps aboard a trading vessel while Zara worked as a traveling mechanic. She'd spoken her first words to a ship's computer, asking it why its lights were sad. She'd learned to read using technical manuals and fairy tales from a dozen different species. She was brilliant and funny and completely fearless, approaching the universe with a confidence that reminded Marcus of humanity at its best. She asked questions about everything, built machines out of spare parts, and had apparently inherited both her parents' gift for understanding technology at an intuitive level. More importantly, she was happy. Despite years of uncertainty and fear, despite being forced to flee her home and live as a refugee, Elena Starweaver faced each day with joy and wonder. She was proof that love could create miracles, that families could survive anything if they held on to each other. As Elena fell asleep between her parents that night, her small hand curled around Marcus's finger. He made a silent promise to the universe. The hegemony believed that humans were a contamination, that hybrid children were threats to the natural order. They would learn how wrong they were, because humans didn't just survive in the galaxy. They thrived. They adapted. They found ways to build families across species lines, to create love where others saw only difference, to fix things that seemed permanently broken. His daughter was living proof of humanity's greatest strength, the ability to create hope in the darkest places, to build bridges where others saw only walls, to love so fiercely that not even 6 years of separation could diminish it. Marcus Chen had spent 6 years learning to fix broken machines. Now he would spend the rest of his life fixing a broken galaxy, one family at a time. one act of love at a time, one repaired ship, and one rescued refugee at a time, because that's what humans did. They took broken things and made them whole again. And sometimes, if they were very lucky, those broken things included themselves.